Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. I'm Lauren Smith with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great 30 minutes lined up for you. Before we begin, I would like to let everyone know that we are recording today's webinar and will make it available later this evening on community.franchise.org. If you have any questions for today's speaker, please add them to the chat box here, and they will be addressed towards the end. Today's topic is how call tracking powers higher revenue for franchisors, and it is brought to us by invoca. Here to provide today's discussion is Stacey Watkins, Senior Product Marketing Manager at invoca. Thank you, Stacey, for joining us today, and thank you to invoca for sponsoring today's Lunch and Learn. I'll go ahead and turn things over to you, Stacey.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for joining today. This is our very first webinar, Lunch and Learn with IFA, so I'm super happy to be here and very glad you've decided to join us. So let's dive right in with the agenda. We'll kind of set the stage here for why phone calls matter to this audience in particular, and why what you have to look forward to in 2022. And then, without getting overly technical, how it all works, a little conversation intelligence 101, and then how conversation intelligence really can help all of you meet the specific challenges that you face. And then we have lots and lots of time for Q&A at the end. So there's a bunch to look at on this slide, but if you call your attention to the bullets on the right, the takeaways here are that ad spend will surpass $161 billion this year, and that's a 10% lift over last year. And so it sort of laser focuses the need this year for all of you to get very clear on what is driving your leads. And then, of course, what is driving conversions from those leads. And then I'm here to talk about how all of that happens in the phone channel. When we talk about call tracking and conversation intelligence, we mean for considered purchases. And that's exactly what it sounds like, a purchase that you have to consider. The consumer has to consider a bit before they make. So things like auto or telecommunications, maybe buying satellite TV or health insurance or refinancing a home. And I won't read all the statistics on this slide, but you can see here some of the industries that offer considered purchases and the importance of phone calls to those industries. So let's talk about how conversation intelligence can deliver. What we're looking at here is what we call the marketing gap. And so, as you are well aware, digital channels, what you see represented here in green on the slide, are really easy to track and report on. But when your prospect or your consumer takes a digital journey and moves it into a phone call, without conversation intelligence, we'd like to say you're flying blind because you don't have any idea what's happening. Did they purchase online? Or whatever your conversion event might be, whether it's a purchase or a form fill, an appointment request, etc. Did they convert? Did they maybe get sent to voicemail and they hung up? Did they leave you and go to a competitor and you'll never see them again? You have no way of knowing, and even worse, you don't have the data you need to make smart decisions. And then for all of you, this is compounded by the fact that this is happening across all of your franchises, right? Across all of those locations. And so what you really need is a program that is flexible, but also simple, so that you can give that centralized view, but then offer that local, seamless personalization, right, in every location. You need to have the granular intelligence or the data, not just at the aggregate, right, at the highest level, but all the way down to the franchise level, and then even down to the agent level at each franchise. And then you need to be able to report and share that data. That data needs to be a central source, and it needs to be a hub, not a headache, right? We say that all the time. If you've got this amazing data, but it's a pain to access it, and it's not easy to share it across individuals at each franchise and multi-franchises, then it's not really doing you much good. So this is a bit about how it works without going too technical. There are two ways that data is captured. One is we capture campaign data through the URL. So let's say somebody sees a digital ad, they click, they land on your website. We capture that campaign data we'll talk a lot about this because it's really important to optimize your marketing campaigns and reduce all that wasted spend. We capture cookie data by virtue of a very simple JavaScript tag, no developer required. And now we get all of this demographic data about the caller. And then we track the call. You can see dynamic phone number insertion that's pointing to both of those phone numbers on our fictional website we use for demo purposes. And what happens is the tag, this JavaScript tag recognizes phone numbers and then replaces them with Invoca trackable numbers so that you get session level attribution. So each web visitor, if they pick up the phone, is tracked, and it looks like this. I know there's a lot on this slide, but you can see you have a call recording, you have a searchable transcript, you have lots of details about the call, the caller. Importantly, their lower right, lots of information about the marketing campaign and the source. And then here in the center, conversational insights. Now, we won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but that refers to AI signals. And what that means is a business can say, hey, I know when my caller says these things, this will lead to a conversion event. So I want to track these particular words or phrases, and then signals track whether or not those occur in each conversation. So really, the main point of this slide is this is the amount of data that happens immediately after the call ends, again, at the call and caller level. And so the outcome of that is you get to link together a digital experience that converts and picks up the phone, and you get to see what happens in that phone call. So in this example, you can see that the caller was interested in auto insurance. You can see the campaign that drove that phone call. And then you can also see, hey, they didn't convert. And so the next best action is to send to a retargeting segment. So let's talk about what that means across revenue generating teams. When you have this level of insight about what's happening, not just in your digital channels, but in your phone channel. So for marketers, that means you get actual true attribution, because your campaigns, your keywords, your ads are not really in the business of driving the most amount of calls. You need to know the most amount of conversions to really be laser focused on optimizing your marketing campaigns. And then for sales teams, by virtue of recordings and transcripts, you understand what is happening with agents that are your highest performers so that you can translate that performance across all agents. And then e-commerce and CX, customer experience, I like to talk about as two sides of the same coin. You know, sometimes we have customers say, hey, I don't really want to drive calls. I'm in the business of conversion events happening on my website. That's what's best for my business. And we get it, but a caller will tell you exactly what's happening over the phone, and you'll have it in a recording and in a transcript. And so they say things like this: the link is broken, the promo code isn't working, does this come in another color? I don't know if you offer this service in my location. They will begin to tell you the insights that you can use and then move them over to your digital experience and fix what's broken so you can optimize to keep the conversion event on your website if that's your goal. So how can conversation intelligence help this audience with their specific set of challenges? So this might sound familiar to you. You might hear from your franchisees, hey, you're not sending me enough leads. And without conversation intelligence, you have no idea if this is true. Are leads driving calls into your franchise locations? And is anybody picking up the phone? You need the data to be able to understand what's happening at each franchise. And so to boil it down to the three most basic questions, the three big questions: which campaigns are driving calls? Who's answering the phone at each location? And are those calls converting? So when you have conversation intelligence and the question is, which campaigns are driving calls? You now have campaign transparency. So you now have the ability to connect your digital journeys to the calls that they are driving. You can attribute that not just at the highest campaign level, but down to the ad and keyword level. And that's really important because without knowing what's converting, you can count calls and you can say, hey, those keywords over there are driving the most calls. But without knowing what's converting, you might spend more marketing dollars on keywords that are driving the highest amount of calls, and they may not necessarily be the highest converting keywords. Only by understanding whether or not conversions are happening in your calls can you understand your true attribution, and that gives you true campaign performance. And so that's exactly what our customer eHealth did. And on the slide, you see key enabling technologies and the Google Ads integration. I just want to call that out specifically. It's our most popular, most used integration at Invoca. And what it does is, it's easy to track in Google Ads what your digital performance is on those ads. But when those ads drive phone calls, now you can understand and take that Invoca data that says, oh, from all of those Google Ads, here's how many conversions were driven. And then in real time, that data is pushed back into Google Ads. And now you have a clear and true attribution picture. And so for eHealth, what that meant was their click to call cost per acquisition went down 60%. Their overall cost per acquisition went down 20%. And that resulted in about $3 million in cost savings. Really big number. So let's talk about that second question. Who's answering the phone? When you have conversation intelligence, you understand answer rate availability or visibility rather, which means how many times is a live person picking up the phone? You understand, was the call answered? Did it get sent to voicemail? Did the caller leave a voicemail, which then you'll have visibility into by way of the transcript and the recording? Or, I don't know about you, I do this all the time. Did they hang up when they got sent to voicemail? You'll have that same visibility across every single franchise, right? So you can see it again at the aggregate level and then drill down by region, location, agent. So you understand individual agent performance. And then really importantly, this is a newer feature at Invoca. You can have visibility into the data of the callers that called into your franchises, but those calls went unanswered. That data is brought to you by missed opportunity signals, meaning there was an opportunity for a call to convert and the opportunity was missed. And so it looks like this. You could imagine perhaps that you have a franchise in each of these states, California, Texas, New York, et cetera, and you can see how many calls came in, the percentage that were answered by a live person, and then looking at California, of those 900 calls, about 121 were actual viable revenue generating calls. And so you can see 29% of that number, that's a big deal. If you look at your average order size, right, you can start to do the math. And so what this feature does is, again, let you know how many missed opportunities you had, meaning calls that went unanswered. And then you can breathe new life into those phone leads. Those are really expensive. And so to be able to circle back with those missed opportunity callers and understand which ones, hey, we should call them back immediately. This was a really high intent call. Or perhaps you have some where you say, well, they expressed interest enough to pick up the phone, but let's just retarget them, maybe with an offer or an ad. And then that third bullet point on the slide, really important, you can troubleshoot what's happening, right? You can understand, why are we having all of these calls go unanswered? Maybe it's just a staffing issue. You can look at franchises that are doing a really good job of answering calls and then dive down more deeply there and be able to lift up other locations based on that, the learnings of your highest performers. And so Christian Brothers was a really early adopter of this feature. And I love this quote from Kate. She says, "We began to see immediate benefits from Invoca's lost sales recovery because we have visibility into unanswered sales calls across every location as soon as they occur. So from there, our franchisees and their teams are empowered to make callbacks immediately or in the future to increase their booked appointment rate." So the final big question is, hey, how many of these calls are converting? Again, we're not necessarily in the business of driving the highest amount of calls, but rather the highest amount of conversion events. That allows you to understand how to optimize for your highest converting campaigns reduce dramatically, in some cases, reduce your wasted marketing spend. And then one of the really specific ways you can do this is by understanding how to retarget and suppress. And so by that we mean, I think you've all had that experience where you're shopping online, but you don't actually purchase, and then you get retargeted for that item later on. Well, that retargeting is expensive. It's expensive to do that. But with Invoca and real-time integrations, you understand immediately who has purchased. And so you're not wasting marketing spend retargeting customers that have converted. That's what Miracle Ear did. This is probably a brand that's really familiar to you. They were able to really increase their call center efficiency. And, you know, imagine this is a really big brand with lots of locations. They dramatically reduced the amount of non-revenue generating calls that were coming into their agents, right? All of us want our sales agents only answering potentially converting calls. And then that led to a 16% improvement in media efficiency. Again, across all their franchises, that's a big number. So from here, I'd like to drop out of the deck and go into the actual dashboard that our customers use to look at all this data. It's one thing to talk about the data. I wanted to give you a peek into it. So I'll scroll down into the dashboard tiles that I think are of biggest interest to you. But one thing I wanted to call out is just these 3 tiles on the left here. You can see that you have visibility into how many calls are coming in and the revenue that those calls are generating. And then you can see the difference between, hey, how many of my incoming calls are actually sales calls and how many are just existing customer calls. That number is a big deal, right? When you start to understand, oh, why do I have customers picking up the phone? Is my help not helpful, right? Is my help not easily accessible? Is there something I can do on the website to keep customers in a more self-service mode so they're not calling into the contact center? I'll scroll down here. You can see this is a fictional telco company. So their conversion event is a service activation. And you can see that by product here, it is broken down also by line of business. And then now we start getting into tiles that I think would be of interest to all of you. So we can start to go from that highest aggregate level. Now we're down into the region level here, all the way down to location. You can start to understand new service activation. So that could be, depending on your business, a purchase or an appointment request, etc. New service activation by count and by percentage, and then by revenue. And so I want you to look at these top two lines, because I feel like this is a really interesting view into the insights available. So you can see here that this first line, there's a 70% service activation rate, which is great. We'd all love that. If you look at that Indian Peaks, which is the line 2, their activation rate is about 60%, which is still great, right? We would all love that. But if you look at the revenue comparison, you can see their revenue is higher, 10% less converting, but higher revenue. So you might look at that and say, well, I want to dive in there. They're obviously upselling in a way that I'd like to learn from, right? That might be one learning. And then if you scroll all the way down, you can see now we can get really, really granular about agent performance. And again, you can start learning from your highest performing agents and then begin to apply those learnings across all agents. Okay, I will jump back into the deck as we begin to close things out here. 3 big takeaways here. The benefits of conversation intelligence are you can understand at a really deep level which leads are driving calls, and of course, most importantly, which are converting. This means you can make data-driven decisions that optimize your marketing spend, again, in some cases, very dramatically, increase conversions and revenue. And again, it's not it's not on this slide, but really significantly increase your customer experience. Finally, you have visibility into true performance across every franchise at the location and agent level. And those insights are invaluable as you translate that across all locations. Thank you so much before we move into Q&A for joining me today. And then one last time, I'd like to jump out of the deck. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to visit our website. Our multi-location and franchise solution is something that is near and dear to us. And we'd love for you to check this out. And I'd like to call your attention. There's even more that you can read here at the bottom of this page, a demo, a really nice case study, and then just kind of a one-pager that you can download. So with that, I will invite Lauren back in and we will spend a little time with Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Sure.
We did have a few questions come in. So the first one is, can the system handle multiple phone numbers and call centers collectively, or is each tracked separately?
I think I understand your question. So at the business decides which numbers are trackable on which pages. And so, you might decide, I'm only tracking that home page number, but you can insert Invoca trackable numbers, replace those anywhere that you currently have a phone number today. I don't know who asked that question, but if that didn't answer your question, please pop something into the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. The next one is, can you review again how conversion is calculated / captured? Is it all via keywords?
It's captured a few ways. Typically, we set up signals that one way it happens is obviously you can listen to and read the conversation through the transcript, but we can set up signals that, or keyword spotting signals that will look for certain words and phrases spoken. So for example, if I'm a healthcare organization, I might look for the spoken phrase, make appointment, or the word confirmation, etc. And so our onboarding team meets with the business and says, okay, let's listen to some calls and get clear on what denotes a conversion event, and then we'll set up which phrases to look for. And then those signals are tracked by virtue of AI. And I know it was a lot to cover, but if you remember back to the data that we showed at the call level, you at the end of the call, you can see how many of those AI signals were met and how many were unmet. And by that, we can then determine conversion event or not.
Great. The next one is, who has access to dashboards?
So that is a great question. The people that have access to dashboards is completely customizable based on the organization. And so you can decide, hey, you can create multiple dashboards. And so you might say, I have a senior staff level dashboard and everything has role-based access. And so you might have certain dashboards that are only managers and above. Also, you can segment your data at the franchise level. So for example, let's say you have 50 locations. You don't want data for all 50 locations going out to everyone, right? That'll be really hard to pull out what each location needs. And so you can create franchise level dashboards. And again, everything has role-based access. So you're only getting the data you need and the data you have access to.
Great. Thank you so much. It looks like those are all the questions that have come in. Thank you, everyone. This was excellent content and excellent feedback from all of you. We really do appreciate it. Again, this webinar was recorded and along with the presentation deck will appear on our website early this evening. You'll be able to find that at community.franchise.org. Thank you again to Stacey and the Invoca team for sponsoring today's webinar. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.